हृदयकुहरमध्ये केवलं ब्रह्ममात्रम् यहमहमिति साक्षादात्मरूपेण भाति हृदि विषमनसा स्वं चिन्वता मज्जतव पवनचलनरोधा आत्मनिष्ठो भवत्वम्. Amorana will commence today's evening Atma Vichara by listening to Bhagavan's Upadesham. As usual, we have been reading from the book Self-Enquiry 1900 to 1950, where Bhagavan has answered on all the questions related to Atma Vichara, self-inquiry, which has been compiled by our founder president, Sri A.R. Natarajan ji. Last week, we had a question from a devotee who asked whether who am I should be done like a mantra japa. And Bhagavan said, no, the question should be put once and one should concentrate to find the source of the ego and prevent occurrences of thoughts. Continuing on that, the devotee has put this next question. Should I endeavor to breathe in and out deeply and rhythmically during the enquiry and synchronize the question, who am I, with the same? Or should I pay attention to the incoming and outgoing breaths while repeating the question, who am I? Who am I? Bhagavan, you should not attend to the breathing. If you are capable of concentrating on the enquiry without it, some may have to attend to the breathing if unable to concentrate on the enquiry alone. Some may require the help of regular pranayama also to steady the mind and control the thoughts. All these practices are to be given up when the mind becomes strong enough to pursue the enquiry without their aid. Pranayama is to be practiced with the usual caution. It will gradually increase the power and duration of the retention of breath. It will make the mind one-pointed. Take itself if unable to concentrate without it. Pranayama is like reins to control the mind horse, or like brakes to control the wheel of thoughts. Who am I and whence am I are one and the same. They refer to the ego only. No such questions can be asked in case of the real self. I repeat Bhagavan's answer. You should not attend to the breathing if you are capable of concentrating on the enquiry without it. Some may have to attend to the breathing if unable to concentrate on the enquiry alone. Some may require the help of regular pranayama also to steady the mind and control the thoughts. All these practices are to be given up when the mind becomes strong enough to pursue the enquiry without their aid. Pranayama is to be practiced with the usual caution. It will gradually increase the power and the duration of retention of breath. It will control the mind. It will make the mind one-pointed. Take itself if unable to concentrate without it. Pranayama is like reins to control the mind horse, or like brakes to control the wheel of thoughts. Who am I and whence am I are one and the same. They refer to the ego only. No such questions can be asked in the case of the real self. Bhagavan is coming to the rescue of all of us when the mind is very turbulent. He is saying it is okay to use the aid of pranayama if one is unable to concentrate. If for some reason the mind is very disturbed and unable to concentrate, one can take the aid of pranayama to bring the mind into the control. As he says here, it is like the reins of the horse or the brake, which puts a brake on the flow of the thoughts. So Bhagavan has given this as an aid, but that itself is not sufficient. It makes the mind one pointed. After the mind is one pointed, one needs to turn the mind inwards and make it abide in the self. That is the ultimate goal of the path of Atma Vichara. So, breathing can be used as an aid and it brings about concentration, but that concentration should be further used to turn the mind to the enquiry and turn to the source of the thought, the source of the ego. Both who am I and whence am I are one and the same, Bhagavan says here. Because as long as there is I or there are thoughts, the ego is active in some way or the other. This should be a very clear understanding. When the ego subsides, when there is no first person divide at all, then the mind, there is no concept of mind. The mind itself becomes the self, or the self itself is the mind, which is thought free. That's why Bhagavan is saying no such questions can be asked in the case of real self. This is a very important clue Bhagavan is giving to us. In case of the real self, there is no question because it's already available. It is already there. We can put many aids to say this to realize the eye. We can say that light outside seen by what? This eye. We can keep using objects to turn the attention as an aid to the subject. But when it comes to resting in the subject itself, the eye has to do nothing to become the eye. I'm talking about the E by E. The E by E has to do nothing to become E by E. It is already that. All it needs to do is just not use any aid outside to point to it. It simply remains. No questions, no answers, no doubts, nothing. That is the real Summayir. That is the real being of the self. But it is the vasanas which doesn't allow us to stay in that state. It pushes us with a doubt. It pushes us out with a thought of an object. It pushes us out with some concept. This is the thing that we need to be wary of. Therefore, Bhagavan has given Atma Vichara. He says, okay, doesn't matter. No matter how many vasanas pushes us out, no matter how many doubts pushes us out, how many concepts rise and pushes us out, all we need to turn is back to the self by asking to whom is this and who am I? And remain in that silence. No questions can be put, no answers are required because we are already that there. The self is the substrate of everything. It is the awareness with which everything is aware of. It is the awareness of the path also. It is also when the path is practiced, it is present. Even when the path culminates, it is going to be present. So awareness is the substratum. It is our real nature. So Bhagavan is saying here, when it comes to the real self, no further questions can be put. And therefore, if there are questions, if there are doubts, if there are thoughts, if there are still thoughts running in us, it is evident that the inward journey is not complete. And therefore, all we need to do is, doesn't matter. Just ask the question, to whom is this? Who am I? Even this inward journey is for whom? And turn the attention, leave the drop the thoughts, and just remain. And that is abiding in the self. And every time that we take a dip in the self or we remain in the self for however long that we can bring the mind and make it dip there and stay there, it is very, very important to understand that it removes, it erases, that it erodes the vasanas. The grace of the self, when we take a dip, it is like the holy Ganges. It, it really, really erases the vasanas, makes them weak, and then every time we keep doing it, the vasanas slowly start to lose the power to grab our attention and take us away from the source. And that is the beauty of Atma Vichara. It is so precise that once we start holding on to Atma Vichara, even a slight thought, even a slight concept will become very clear. Oh, with this concept, I am again holding on to thoughts. I am also having doubts, or I am actually having a concept. Everything becomes so clear by this Atma Vichara. And this Atma Vichara doesn't leave itself until it reigns that silence of the self within us. It brings that, it puts us in that state, and then only it also merges. Like Bhagavan says, it is like it is a stick used to stir the funeral fire. It will burn everything, and finally it will also get burnt. And then the silence of the self, as they say, becomes silent. Finally, the rest, no noise anymore. The rest, the final rest of the self comes. And that is until such time, Bhagwan's grace will not allow us to move around. It will make us come back to the self. Bhagwan is the very self. He is oneself only. He is the source of everything. So both who am I and whence am I is one and the same. It both focuses on removing the ego, the first person divide that is there, which is really not there in the self, and makes us get back to our real nature. With the immense grace of Bhagavan, in the next 15 minutes, let us do Atma Vichara. In Atma Vichara, every thought we inquire to whom is this, recognize that it is for me, and therefore I have become an individual, an identity, and then inquire who am I, and go to the source of the I, that is the self. And by repeatedly diving, when we ask the question, who am I? Bhagwan's grace will take us to the self. By repeatedly diving into the self, we erode the strength of the vasanas. And in due course, Bhagavan says, the mind will gain the enough strength to just remain at the source. The immense grace of Bhagavan, let us do Atma Vichara for the next 20 minutes. Shriramanaaya.
Namo Ramana. Prostrations to Ramana, shining as a self in all beings. By the immense grace of Ramana, who is the self manifest, we have been meditating on the teachings of Bhagavan, his answers to questions relating to self-enquiry, compiled by Sri A.R. Natarajan, and we have also been blessed to practice self-enquiry. And in this part of the satsang, we are meditating on the verses from Ramana Gita. They are also answers of Bhagavan to questions posed by different devotees and recorded in Sanskrit in 18 chapters as Ramana Gita by Ganapati Muni. We are now meditating on the 5th chapter, which is Hridaya Vidya. And Bhagavan has given us the location of the spiritual heart after telling us that this location which is given, which is to the little to the right of the center of the chest, little to the right, this location is given as a concession. He is indicated that because it is a concept, it is a varnana, it is a description of the spiritual heart, that is also a concept. Real nature of the heart is that it is a source of the I, the source of all thoughts, the source of everything. It is the source. The source is the heart. So, Bhavanakriti Varnanam, Bhagavan has given us the warning that it is to describe it is only it would make it a concept. However, we must understand, and normally concepts are better clarified when the concept or when the truth is beyond the concept. The first way of reaching or approaching the truth through words is the negation part, by telling what it is not. So, Bhagavan tells us that it is not the anahata, it is not physical, it is not the blood pumping organ, it is not the physical heart, it is the source of the awareness of what? Of all things, of the world, and of the sense of I-ness within us. And how does this heart connect to the awareness of the world, or how is awareness of the world connected to the heart? It is because from the heart, the awareness or the consciousness rises to the mind center, the Sahasrara, and from there it spreads through the whole body. One becomes aware of the entire body, and one associates the consciousness with the body and limits it to the body, and therefore perceives a world outside and divides one's consciousness into that which is outside, which is the world, and that which is inside the body, which is I, which is seen to be I. This division happens, and Bhagavan says this is what is called becoming a worldly person, samsari manujo bhavet. But he says, if one takes the consciousness that has risen to the mind back to the heart, atmasthasya sahasraram, then that mind, instead of being externalized or worldly, becomes pure light, shuddham jyotirmayam bhavet, and there is no desire, sankalpa over there. There is no sankalpa or desire whatsoever. Tatra jeeven na sankalpo. even if something, any objects or perceptions happen, what happens? They fall away, they dissolve into the awareness of the self. And such a firm abidance in the self, grinhatopi sthiraikadhi, sthira ekadhi, grinhatopi, even if objects are grasped, even if objects are known, if the mind remains steady in that oneness, sthira ekadhi, sahaja sthiti ruchyate. That is called the sahaja samadhi or the sahaja sthiti. But if one loses consciousness of objects and remains with the consciousness of the self alone, that is called nirvikalpa. The point is that it is important, we saw, that we must understand or go to the thought-free state in order to understand that our existence is not in any way dependent on thoughts. We are not dependent on thoughts. Neither, says Bhagavan, one part is that we are not dependent on thoughts. But do they have any impact on us? I may exist in the absence of thoughts. Say in Nirvikalpa, I exist in the absence of thoughts. But when worldly awareness arises, is it still possible? How to hold the Sahaja state? How to come to the Sahaja state? One may get to the thought-free state of Nirvikalpa, one cuts off all thoughts, cuts off all objective awareness and experiences the bliss of the self. Then the moment one comes out, the moment one experiences or sees the world or perceives a world or perceives any object, does the awareness of the self disappear? Do we still start functioning as if we are limited to the name and form? What does one do then? Then Bhagavan says, recognize that these objects are not apart from you. All the objects, the entire universe in fact, is contained within the sense I am a body. Andam vapushi nishesham. So, this world does not exist apart from the body idea. If I do not think of myself as a form, how can I experience a world? It is impossible, says Bhagavan. So, there is no such thing as a world apart from your body idea, and therefore it cannot have any impact on you unless you have this sense, I am the body. So, how do you get over this sense, I am the body? Recognize that the body idea has no independent existence. Nishesham hridaye vapuhu. The body is entirely contained in the heart. The heart envelops the body idea. Bhagavan says, after his enlightenment, when he faced and conquered the fear of death, by inquiring for whom the death is and by enacting it intensely, the process of death, and understanding that though the body was as good as dead, he could feel the full current. It was not even understanding, he just had it, the experience in a flash, as it were, that the self was not dependent on the body. It was a power which transcended and contained the body as well. So, this thought, I am a form, Bhagavan says it is contained in the heart because it is not a continuous experience. It disappears, it changes in dream and disappears altogether in deep sleep. And it rises again, it rises and sets. So, where from does it rise and where into does it set? And Bhagavan has already told us that that is the spiritual heart. He says it is from the spiritual heart that one becomes aware of the mind, and through the mind one becomes aware of the body. So, the entire body idea is powered only by the self or the heart. It is not an independent entity at all. When we seek its source, where from does this I sense arise? It will return to the heart, says Bhagavan. One will recognize that it is not apart from the self. Once one has recognized that it is not apart from the self, through the experience of merging in the source, of getting back into the source, then even if objective knowledge appears or rises, one will have the absolute clarity that this is only contained in the heart. So, one goes to Grinhatopi sthirai eka, sthiraha eka dhi, sthiraika dhi. One will get to that sthira eka bhavana, that non-dual awareness as the substratum of all experiences, in which everything else is contained. And for this, Bhagavan also gives us the clue. He says that the entire world, if you look at it, it is all contained in the body idea. Again, in Saddarshanam also, Bhagavan says that Dhiya sahodeti dhiyastameti lokastato dhi pravibhasya yeshaha. Although the world and the mind appear to rise and set together, it is by the mind that the world is lit. So, Bhagavan is saying here that the world is not apart from the body and the body is contained in the heart. So, the world is not apart from the heart. Nothing is apart from the heart. Or if you look at it from another perspective, everything, the entire world and the body thought may be called the mind. It can be called mind. So, where does this mind spring from? The mind springs in turn from the heart. Ashesha hridaye tasmat katha parisamapyate. The entire story of the world, the entire story of the universe is contained in the heart. Bhuvanam manaso nanyat, bhuvanam manaso nanyat, anyan hridayan manaha, bhuvanam manaso nanyat. The world is not apart from the mind. In the previous verse, Bhagavan is telling us the world is not apart from the body. Here he is telling us the world is not apart from the mind. They are the one and the same thing which he is saying. But Bhagavan very sweetly says that when he had the experience of death, rather when he enacted intensely the experience of death and questioned himself, what is it that dies? He held his body stiff, he held his breath, and he did not think that there was anything apart from the body. He says, I never had a concept of a mind. I never felt there was something called mind. So, where is the question of questioning what is this mind or where from does it spring? That doesn't arise at all, because he never had a concept of a mind. Whereas for us, the mind, the thoughts are very, very predominant. We feel the presence of an entity called mind. So, Bhagavan is saying, if you think you are the body is the root of all experiences. If you think you are the mind, The mind is the root of all experiences, including the body and including the world. There is no world apart from the mind. There is, in that sense, when we look at it, the body is also part of the world. It is an object that I perceive. It is an object that I think of, the form, and that's why it is changeable also. I can think of myself as anything and everything, and I can experience myself as different bodies also. In my dream, I experience myself as a different body than the body which is there in the waking. That's because it is with my mind that I experience the body, and through the body I experience the world. Therefore, all experiences stem only from the mind, says Bhagavan. And where from does the mind spring? What is the nature of the mind? If we inquire, we find manasam tu kim margane krite. If we ask ourselves, what is the nature of the mind? Vrittayo manaha. Mind is only a series of thoughts or a bundle of thoughts. Mind is only thoughts. There is nothing apart from thoughts in the mind. Everything and anything in the mind is only a thought. And all these thoughts are dependent on the I thought. So, vrittayastu aham vrittim ashritaha. All thoughts are dependent on the I thought. Therefore, vritti aham manaha. The mind is nothing but the thought, I am so and so. I am a form. I am an entity. That is the mind. And this mind, this entityhood, is what gives rise to an experience of the world. So, bhuvanam manaso nanyat. Dhiya sahodeti dhiyastameti lokastato dhi prabhibhasya yeshaha. Although the world and the mind appear to rise and set together, it is by the mind that the world is lighted, says Bhagavan in Saddarshanam. So, it is on the rising of the mind that one becomes aware of the world, and when the mind subsides into the heart, there is no awareness of the world. But if we understand through taking the mind back to its source, if one experiences that the mind is not apart from the source. So, anyanya hridayan manaha. The mind is not apart from the heart. When one understands this, the entire story of the universe is known to be contained in the heart. Everything is known to be contained in the heart. When the mind is taken back to its source through enquiry, when the mind or the root of the mind, which is the I thought, is taken back to its source through the enquiry, who is this I? Who am I? Or where from does this I arise? What is its source? This I, which disappears altogether in deep sleep, where from does it arise? When one enquires thus and merges in the source, then the mind will first experience the nirvikalpa, the absence of objective knowledge, and when this enquiry continues, when one comes out of the nirvikalpa also, through the questioning, who had this experience, who went into nirvikalpa, who has come out of nirvikalpa, who is the I who says, I had a recollection, an experience, and I am now having a recollection of the nirvikalpa. When the enquiry continues and is steadily used to take the mind back again and again and again to its source, gradually it will lose the individuality that will dissolve into the very source, which is the fullness, the heart, which is also called grace. That grace will absorb the mind back into itself. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ram.